So, Audra, you and I have been doing these, I want to say for 2.5 months, something like that. Does that sound
Yes,
about right to you?
that's about right. Yep.
Okay. And we started these because given the time, given COVID-19 and the shifting sands of how businesses were going to operate, we wanted to always stay focused on innovation, how small businesses were iterating what their operations were, what their product or services were, how they handled employees at this point in time. And it was always a forward thinking about where the business is going next. I'm actually really excited for today. Not actually, I am very excited about today because Eric Currence, and I'll have Eric introduce himself, and Moses from Flavor 91 are going to join us today, and we're going to focus more on the interpersonal part of this, right? The leadership that we engage in on a day-to-day basis with our employees, with our customers, and Eric brought up some good points in a previous conversation with ourselves as well, not just put out to society. So I would just like Eric and Moses to go ahead and introduce themselves at this point in time. And then we can kind of get into the conversation on leadership, especially when it comes into times of crisis. So, Eric, Moses, please.
Sure. So to echo John, thanks everyone who joined into the conversation today. My name is Eric Currence, and I'm a licensed psychologist. I own a consulting firm, Currence Consulting in Gahanna, Ohio, since 2010, where we provide a myriad of psychological services to the community at the individual level, the group level, and the family level. I was part of the first cohort of Goldman Sachs out of Columbus, Ohio, and now a proud alum of the program, and really have utilized a lot of the conversations that we had over that 3-month period to pause and pivot during the last 3 months when we've dealt with a global pandemic and a national crisis. And so it is my pleasure to be here today and really talk with you all about what leadership looks like in this time for me within my organization.
Thank you, Eric. Moses?
Yeah, same thing. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the time that everyone is taking to be here and get a chance to really speak in a way that connects. And hopefully we can all walk away with something productive today. But yeah, I also was a part of the Goldman Sachs 10K cohort in fall. My own Flavor 91 Bistro with my mother and my sister. We've been in business almost 4 years now. We source from Ohio farms, and we use our Ethiopian influences to impact, familiar foods. We call it the American fare with Ethiopian flair. So we got grass-fed burgers and great wings and salads, soups, but we try to make it in-house, make sure it's non-GMO, no antibiotic, hormone-free, and just sell the type of food that we would want to eat. And yeah, just like Eric said, how we've been trying to pivot and stay in business and thrive while we're going through the pandemic and even the times that we're in now with the civil unrest. It just provides us with a lot of opportunity, and we're glad to speak.
Wonderful. So I'm actually interested in setting the stage for 2020 at this point. And what were your goals? I know, big business does long range forecasting, small business. You guys have been through the cohort before, so we talked about forecasting. Were there just any goals that you had set for Currence Consulting or for Flavor 91 before everything got turned upside down?
Mm. Yeah, a lot of goals. And Eric, if you want to start, that's fine.
That's all you, Moses.
He said,
Okay.
go ahead.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Sales goals were definitely an important factor that's been impacted. Just looking at the year before, and seeing how things usually turn a corner from, I'd say, the middle of February, and then the Arnold Classic comes, and then kind of the weather gets better and people are out and about more. This is usually the busiest time of the year for us.
Oh,
Okay.
Sorry, I think I muted myself. Sorry. What did you guys catch anything I said, or was I muted the whole time?
No,
You
you
said
were.
you're going into the busiest time of year.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So that definitely impacted our goals. That definitely made us change in our perception of what we would be doing during this time of year, and even how we were planning on expanding on certain menu items. That kind of had to shift because we couldn't invest in too much inventory. We had to kind of reduce our scale a little bit. So those are a few things on our end.
So certainly at the start of this year, I entered it with a bunch of ideas of what growth might look like. And so through the process of Goldman Sachs, one of the things that I wanted to be able to do was create an employee assistance program. And so the initial goal was to be able to launch that process in April of this year. So building the infrastructure, creating the systems. But at the same token, one of the things that I was looking at is the overall expansion of the business. So we had secured a loan. We were in the process of looking at buildings, and we're really close to making a purchase early March. Actually, the building that we looked at was in contract. It was supposed to fall through, and it ended up going through. So we were still in this space where we were looking to twofold: one, to get into some level of commercial real estate, but also to house the practice within whatever we purchased. And really the impact of COVID-19 really put all of those things on the back burner to some degree, because for us in particular, the way that we had to go about doing business completely shifted. And so in the background, that those conversations are still there, but really looking at how I can take some of those ideas that we had and overlay them on the landscape that we are currently experiencing is some of what we have transitioned to over the last couple of months.
How quickly were you making those decisions? And I guess let me give you a little bit more context to this. Generally in a planning cycle, it could be a quarter long, right? Looking out to the next year even. And so you have time to research, you have time to test run, you have time to implement, you have time to pivot. You didn't have that though. I mean, in March and to an even more condensed timeline of the past 2 weeks, there hasn't been time to plan, prepare, and then act. Eric, what was your decision making on a day-by-day basis going into March?
Absolutely. So I'll give just a very quick backdrop that the majority of the revenue that we experience comes through third-party insurance companies who are paying based off of premiums that they have with organizations, individuals, etc. And the reason that's so impacting is some of the decisions about how we offer services is impacted by the third-party insurance companies deciding how they want to reimburse. And so one thing historically that has been hard to do is to get them to reimburse for telehealth, period. And in some cases, they're willing to reimburse for telehealth, but at a lower rate. So historically, even though it provides some level of flexibility from a revenue perspective, I've made the decision to stay away from doing online therapy because it didn't make sense to do the same amount of work for less money, and in some cases, considerably less, up to 40% in some cases. But we actually had a COVID scare around March 19th, I want to say. It was definitely before the government or the governor declared a social distancing. And so literally one night at 5 p.m., I got a call to say, I'm starting to experience symptoms. I believe it's just the common cold, but I'm unaware. And so within a 24-hour period, we went from being completely brick and mortar, face-to-face, to 100% telehealth, no one operating out of the office. And so to your point, under normal circumstances, and I as a leader tend to be pretty risk adverse, pretty slow to act. This is one of those spaces where we just did not have that option, thinking about the safety of our clients, thinking about the safety of the staff. We had to pretty quickly move into a space of considering what was happening from a health perspective, but also figuring out how to to operate immediately. And I will say one thing, one of the things that I'm so happy that I did was I had taken the time prior to March to really research options like telehealth to know what they were. And so when it came to a space of needing to transition, even though that was not on the plan for 2020, I was not completely unaware of what that transition would look like. And so I'm really happy that at some point in the back of my mind, I thought, I need to at least understand what this process looks like so that if we ever move to that space, we're ready to do it. And so even though all the questions weren't answered, I certainly felt much better positioned to make a pretty quick move because there was some level of institutional knowledge about how that would impact our business and what we would need to do in order to make that work.
That's a really great answer, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. All right, Moses, same question to you. Decision making, you know, in the days and the weeks right around the start of COVID.
So yeah, we had to do things a little bit more split second, just because we had inventory on our hands and we really needed to get it to move. And so we just automatically implemented a SMS messaging platform so that we can text our guests, hey, we have a 15% off promo going on right now. Come on in, utilize it. And it was already around the same time as supporting small businesses going on. So we just felt like instead of letting our food go to waste, we got to let people know and communicate as much as we can through Facebook, Instagram. Look, we got this going on. Help us get this out the way so that we don't have to throw it away. And so people were very responsive to it, and they were already conscious of the fact that, you know, they wanted to keep small businesses around. And so they participated, and then that helped us get our par levels, you know, in a place where we felt like, okay, we can order, you know, a certain amount a week, and we can follow this pattern and not over order and, you know, have ourselves holding on to all this inventory. So that was a split second decision. We just had to make it work, and we did it that Monday, the next day, right after we heard everything would be closed. And so we're just starting to think that Sunday night, what else can we do? How else can we move forward? So we got in touch with all of our employees and let them know, hey, we're thinking about you. And some of them even, you know, sent us messages and said, hey, we got, you know, the governor's allowing us to do takeout cocktails. The next day we posted that, you know, just try to stay in communication as much as possible because, you know, people want to know what they can do and how they can help. And so that was a few of the other things that we just had to just jump on it as soon as possible. And all of our suppliers were fine. You know, they were just like, hey, let us know what you need. If you don't need as much this week, or if you don't need anything this week, just let us know, keep us in the loop. And so that's just what we mainly had to do, just keep everybody in touch. And then with the restaurant, it might be a little different than Eric, but you know, when it went straight to carry out and takeout, it afforded us more time in the day than it did in the evening. So during the daytime, we would, you know, just be me, my mother, my sister, and we would take a few orders, but we would still have ample amount of time to at least enact on other things that we felt like is important to help build our own business within the four walls that we have. So whether it was investing in different takeout boxes and things that can help keep the food in better conditions as the time it travels and the distance that it goes. And we just try to plug that in and be as educated as possible as we could to see how we can update our operations in the meantime and then have something to show for when things became a new normal or when things kind of came back together.
So I know Audra had a question. I wanted to follow up real quickly on something, Moses. And, you know, Eric said that he feels like he is slow to act. Right, Eric? I think those are the exact words you said. Moses, tell us a little bit about your personality, and if you like, from a leadership position, do you want to be in the fire, or would you rather have more time? You're more comfortable with a longer planning period, because it sounds like you have flourished in this atmosphere.
I think you got to take it both. There's validity in, you know, long-term planning, but you know, I always feel like we're in the fire because you're in a restaurant and things are always going at a fast pace. So I find, you know, solace in that at the same time. You know, it kind of has to make you think, get yourself to think slowly and fast at the same time. So I appreciate it. I don't mind it at all. I just know that we have to do something, and I just want to get on it as much as we can. And you never know who it resonates with, because, out of nowhere, guests would just come. Guests would just come in and just drop off sanitizer or masks, or no one was asking them to do that. Some people had already ate and were like, "Hey, I just want to see you guys around." So we just look at that and said, "Man, we gotta turn our own hustle up a little bit, and see how we can impact other people at the same way that they're doing for us." So it was almost like, iron sharpening iron, from the guest perspective, from our perspective, from our employees' perspective, because they kept staying in touch with us too. So we're just like, man, we got to do something, and we got to stay on it, and still try to find pockets of time where we can long-term plan, at the same time. Um, so I enjoy being in the fire a lot, and I try to find ways to solve the problems that are in the fire, so that we can, be able to be calm, and be able to be collected at the same time.
Thank you for that, Moses.
John, can I just jump in really quick and say one of the stretches that has happened for me is that by way of profession, we are counselors. We are they used to laugh at us in graduate school because they would say, you all are counselors, you just want to get in a circle and hug. But by the very nature of how we're trained, we're very people oriented. And so one of the things historically that I've been able to do, especially having a small staff, is as changes are made within the organization, really get buy-in and input from my employees and make them feel part of the decisions, which has worked well, and it is a good way to operate. But I think one of the things that this has really caused me to have to do is be comfortable acting extremely decisively, and not being overly concerned with whether or not the staff thought that that was a good move, because I knew from a current and longevity perspective that it's what needed to happen. And that certainly has been outside of the realm of my normal way of engaging, but I found great benefit of it. And to Moses's point, I don't think it's an either or. I really think it's about being comfortable in both spaces. But I think that I don't know outside of this crisis that I would have been pressured so quickly to need to be decisive and need to be comfortable with the fact that my staff might be extremely uncomfortable with some of the decisions that I made, but those decisions needing to be made anyway. And so that's certainly one of the areas that this has required that I grow in, and I think ultimately it's going to be really good for business.
Yeah, I think what Eric just said is extremely true. But another thing I didn't even mention was I have my mother and my sister with me all times, and so their input helps me, make better decisions at the same time too. So all that kind of comes together, and just like how Eric was saying, communicating with his people about, hey, this is what's going on. Hey, this is what's going on. This is what I decided to do, or can I have your input? That all helps with the decision making.
Well, and just real quick before we pass it over to Audra, I've been taking my notes, and I have the words communication, have to do something, take advantage of opportunities, and buy in with employees. Your employees, as a small business owner, are looking to you, right? And if you aren't sure, if you show any trepidation or uneasiness, it bleeds out. I mean, it's going to infect everybody at that point in time. Go ahead, Audra. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. Well, and you both answered, a part of my question, which is, how has your leadership changed amidst crisis? And so part of that you have already addressed. And, as we all know, change is coming fast, and change is coming hard, and change is coming, painfully as well, in lots of different ways. And so, as we look past, on top of COVID, and as we build on all of the racial inequality that's, coming back to light again in the midst of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many others. Talk about what you've had to do from a empathetic and a vulnerability standpoint in your leadership styles. And we're all leaders, right? Home, jobs, and community. And so maybe you can share with us how you've kind of stepped into that leadership piece.
Moses, do you want to start?
We tried to just take it in and try to think of the complex nuances that are, taking place, whether it's within our own relationships and, what's going on outside. But one thing that's true that we've been feeling is just an overwhelming amount of support. Um, and we've tried to look at that as, okay, this allows us to display humanity, uh, reciprocate that back to people that are showing us support, showing us love, and maybe the people that don't know what to do. And try to use our platform to speak to what you can do. What can be done in this certain time. And one good thing is everyone kind of looks at it and they agree. It's like, this isn't right, what's going on, and it's almost like a collective mindset that's wants to solve the issue as well. So, what we've done so far is just give people an opportunity to find out about other Black-owned businesses and see how you can circulate your dollar. Economically empower them. Find out about the organizations that are around and try to support them. Make the necessary phone calls. Do what you can do. And you can actually make the change happen. I think that's one thing that most people don't realize is that you can do that. And so that's been encouraging to see. And just like communication goes on anything, when you see that communication follow up with results, it tells you how much power you have when you're working collectively.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I will say for me, and part of this is based off the industry that we're in. My staff has to come to work prepared to pour. Rare is it the case that we are engaging our customers and gaining something from them. We are pourers, and so I think that historically I've done what I believe is a decent job of creating an environment of support. But I found that. That the pull on me as a leader has been far greater during the last 2 to 3 months, and really being intentional about giving my employees space for them to not be okay, space for them to be able to have conversations about how they are impacted by what is going on and not need to be in a space of being in control, because in that therapeutic relationship, they are the ones who have to maintain some level of control. They are the ones who are helping to guide their clients to answers. And so being really intentional about allowing them wherever they are to not have to be, from their perspective, in a politically correct space. If you're struggling with the idea of wearing a mask, I want us to be able to talk about that. And so from a conversational perspective, as well as a self-care perspective. And so I have sent some gifts to my employees' homes and some other things just to kind of help them to understand that I recognize that while the business still needs something from them, I recognize the weight that it puts on them having to still produce at this level when things appear to be falling apart around you. And so I think that for me, that empathy piece comes a little more naturally because it's what I'm trained to do as part of my job. But I will say as a leader that it has created a lot more emotional energy for me, a lot more thoughtfulness. And so when you're already trying to pivot and figure out how to make things work from strategy and actual nuts and bolts to then add the pressure of that, it is an added layer that has to be considered, but it is essential. And so I was just reading an email from one of my staff members yesterday that was just talking about, one of the lines at the end said something to the effect of, thank you for holding all of this together while we're falling apart. And so it at least let me know to some extent that I'm at least providing that as a persona, whether or not it's the truth or not. I am giving them the sense that they can lean on me in a way that allows them to feel safe and to be able to process that part, because I think especially in the work we do, but I really feel like across the board in the work that all of us do, that people need to be well in order to do the work. And if ever there was a combination of time where people have the capacity to not be well, I think we're experiencing that now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Eric about empathy. I think I'm inching my way to getting better at that myself. But definitely, one thing my mother did from the beginning was when it first started, all of the people that work here, can come and eat free anytime. And just in case, you might not have an opportunity to find food, or you might not, want to cook for yourself or whatever, just something to give you a heads up and say, if you want to get something to eat, come on in. And, we still, another thing my mother enacted was like, if there are employees that we have that don't have a secondary income, we should still pay them for at least a few weeks or as long as we can. just to give them a boost too at the same time. So all those things, like, it wasn't my decision, but it was her decision. And I just looked back at that and said, man, her level of humanity is up. And I think that's something we all need to find ways to dial in. And so those were a few of the things, and that empathy definitely stood out to me. And I was like, how am I lacking in that? And how can I, boost that, moving forward? And how can I figure out ways to do it every single day if I can? And I think I'm getting better at it too. So it's good to see, because now I know what people mean by it. Um, and so that's some things that I noticed, and I just want to give credit to my mother and my sister too, because it's not just me.
Well, that's leadership by example too, right, Moses? I mean, you see people that you respect, that have a place not only in the community but your heart, and you want to resemble that. I think that's easy to understand by everybody out there. Eric had something that I wanted to apply to Moses real quick. Eric, you said you felt like you had a weight on you, the responsibility for your employees, things like that. I think most of the people on this call, or at least a certain percentage of them, have been to Flavor 91. And Moses, when we see you interact with all your different customers and all your employees and people who walk in off the street, there is a level of respect that they have for you. I would ask a question: do you feel the weight for your community to I don't even know, perform at a high level, keep the doors open, keep paying your employees? What are some of the things that you're feeling at this point in time?
Yeah, there's definitely a weight. Of course, it comes with making sure that your business is viable, and you're able to still put smiles on people's faces. You're still able to serve to the best of your ability. One thing I always think about is just the condition of food, just as it travels and you get it home. And even when everything started to open back up, we're still doing takeout and delivery, just because we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we have so much volume that we can't handle the demand. And respect is always a number one value. If you reciprocate that to other people and you work on it yourself every day, then you'll be able to live. You'll be able to interact with people. You'll be able to give them the view and the vision of something different, but something that they relate to at the same time. So yeah, the impact and the burden is definitely shared amongst me and my family and everybody that understands. My thing is just communication. I feel like if you can communicate as best as you can possibly and just be honest about it, most people will understand, and they'll be fine. They'll just say, okay, we'll look out for you another time, or we appreciate you wanting to know. And sometimes it's tough conversations too. We didn't always get good reviews during this whole coronavirus thing, and we've had to deal with that at the same time. And I welcome it, because like I said, that respect level is there, and I just want to know how we can do better. That's all. So that's the main burden behind everything I think about, is just, are we doing well, and how do people perceive it, and do people feel comfortable enough to even talk to us about it if they don't think so?
Could you expand that conversation to not just Flavor 91, but your community? What I mean, and however you want to define community, right? Whitehall, Ethiopian immigrants, Columbus. It doesn't matter to me. But could you expand that to your community?
What do you mean exactly? Because I want to understand, the question so that I can answer.
Well, that answer you gave was very focused on food quality and making sure that Flavor 91 has maintained a high level of respect in the eyes of customers, right? So how do you view yourself as part of a larger community? And specifically, again, this could be, do you feel a weight of responsibility to speak up? Do you feel a weight of responsibility to act? You're not just Flavor 91. So how do you view your role from a bigger perspective?
Yeah, I do feel that we have a responsibility to act, for sure. And when it comes to either healthcare professionals or essential people, or just anything around us that relates to what we're able to do, and we can be of like potential help towards, of course, just like, there's several healthcare professional centers around us, and everybody is struggling to a degree. Everyone is kind of going through it or feel the impacts. And so that's why we decided to do what we did for healthcare professionals. And even just throughout the year, we do a lot of things in the community, and we do find that to be, it's just a reciprocation process, to me. If you invest in the community, then they're going to see that as a good thing, and try to see how they can help you when you need it. It's just a dialogue. You're in this place. People come and help you stay in business. I feel like there should be a responsibility. Maybe not everybody does, but it's not even a burden there. It's just like, how can we do it? And let's just do it. And just always try to be, try not to be tone deaf. That's my main thing. Is if you're gonna do something, don't be tone deaf about it. But yeah, I feel like there's important responsibility behind it. You have to. I think so. That's just me. You have to do something. If you're in a community, you have to do something because you want to be a part of the reason why it's progressing, to me.
Thanks, Moses. We appreciate that. And I think that's a great perspective. Eric, as we think about your practice, talk about how you build intentional time for yourself and your staff to really rest and practice self-care for yourselves. As a leader, how do you emulate for your staff?
So I think the first part of that is being extremely intentional. And so one of the things that I've challenged myself to do is to increase the one-on-one time that I'm having with members of my staff, which is easier to do because I only have 4 of them. But that is something that I've been intentional about almost from the beginning of them transitioning to work from home, since there was physical distance between us in a way that had not been before. And also making sure that there was a part of them that understood that those one-on-one interactions were not simply about my being able to talk about where the company's going and what their responsibilities might be, but that a portion of that really was devoted to checking in on them and seeing how they're doing. I also found that they really benefited from the collective conversation. So not just hearing from me, but being able to collectively have that time with just them. And so we've set up Zoom calls and things of that nature. One day I was really surprised because I had found a time during our schedule where we could meet at noon and have a lunch call. And they had all expressed interest in having the call. So we could either have it at lunch or we could do it at 7:30 at night. And one of my staff members said, let's do it at 7:30 at night with wine. And I did not think that we'd be able to get consensus from 4 people to give up their evening to kind of connect. And it was unanimous. That is what they wanted to do. And so finding even opportunities like that where they collectively can come together and not talk clinical, but talk about what was going on with them. And in some cases, not even talk about the pressure of what was happening, but just to be able to check in and be in that space of connectedness. I also sent them a self-care package. And so one of the things from my perspective was challenging them beyond the conversation to make sure that they were taking time. So there's this organization that produces what they refer to as TheraBoxes. So self-care therapy boxes, and there's personal self-care items in there, journaling, just other things that were right up my clinician's alley. But it was just another way to challenge them beyond my saying it, to say, hey, how are you going to it? And it gave me another touch point to be able to say what was in the box, because they were mystery boxes. So I didn't get to choose all of the elements of the box. So just this conversation piece of what was in the box, how did you use it? But I think that intentionality piece of making sure that there was space for them to do it, and really challenging even in conversation to make sure the language of what I shared showed to some degree that I was doing that on my own, because it's really easy to say, hey, go do this. It's something different to say, here's how this is operating for me. And so those are just a couple of the ways that I've challenged that space to be made for us collectively, and they seem to have responded well. Now, I will say, as we continue to be in this process, so we're still working from home, I don't see us going into the office a second before July 1st, but it'd likely be even beyond that. And so I don't know how to keep that fresh. That's something that I'm still kind of stopping, assessing and really figuring out what that looks like. But those are some of the things for the last couple of months that have been pretty effective.
Those are great suggestions. And one of the things, I heard on a call last night as I was a part of a group of about 200 people from Columbus State who all came together on a Zoom call, if you can believe that, which was an incredible opportunity for people to come together and share. But, we really talked about like starting with our family. And thinking about family in a larger sense. So our family, our community, maybe it's our family of origin, maybe it's our work family, then we go up, further. We have created this 10K SB family, and then we're building out additional small business owners as family. And so as you think about connectivity with those family, with other family people, how do you perceive keeping the conversation going in a way that helps us all stay connected on all of the key topics that are happening now, whether it's COVID, whether it's racial inequality, all the things that really are weighing on us collectively? What's your perception, Moses and Eric, about as leaders keeping that going for any of those groups of family, I would say?
So Audra, you're saying, how do we keep the conversation alive?
Yeah, how do you keep the conversation alive? How do we keep this going where we're, really reaching out to one another and having, good, honest conversation, dialogue about where we are as a business, where we are as a small business community, where we are as a community on larger issues of COVID and racial inequality?
Well, I think things like this right here, just taking the plan of action and putting people together where you can let them know, hey, this is something that we feel still needs to be on the radar. This is something that still needs to be talked about. And if there are a direct plan of actions afterwards attached to it that can be executed and followed up with, then that's ways definitely, say, for example, with the coronavirus or any other viruses that come up, or even the social justice, there has to be things that are directly linked to creating the change that we want to see or the results that we want to get ahead of that, and bringing awareness to it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as those things come into play, I think that those are ways that it can stay relevant. And I think, the more that time presses on, we all went through an experience where we all had to sit down for about 2-3 months. I think that's what allowed us to be more cognizant of what's going on around us, and educating ourselves, and sit on some information for some time instead of it being microwavable news, here today, gone tomorrow. And so I think those all come into factor when it comes to keeping the conversation alive, is having the conversations and having a direct plan of action that can impact, the change.
Yeah, and I'll just add two things that I think are important to keeping it going. One is intentionality, which I think is what Moses is speaking to. And also a sense of accountability. Like, one of the things that I've really challenged myself to do is make it so that this was a reciprocal conversation versus it being didactic, me talking about an issue, really getting a sense and challenging my staff to share their perspective about where we are and how it impacts our business and things we need to consider. And so versus sending out an email saying, here's my response to how we return to work amid COVID in a way that makes me feel healthy, I sent a question prompt to say, I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts about how we return, and not forcing, but really challenging them to be part of the conversation, so that one, it gives them a voice, but also it kind of includes them in this sense of there is a personal responsibility that we all have in regards to keeping this conversation forward. And I want them to be thoughtful about their intention and how that impacts the conversation of business. And so, I certainly have attempted to do that in a way that felt more I'm open to where you are, then accountable, here's what I need you to do. But at the end of the day, that's really what it is. I need you to be thoughtful about this and really figure out from your space, what are some of the challenges that are going to prevent you from doing this well? What are some of the challenges that might prevent our business from doing this well? And really having them bring a component to the conversation versus it being something that I, as the owner of the business, am consistently responsible for.
Hey, Eric, when I heard you say that, I'm making the assumption that you did not get into counseling because you wanted to own your own business and be in power of the decision making for other people. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so is it an easy process for you to give up decision making or empower your employees to go out and create the structure for fill in the blank, whatever problem that exists?
Yes and no. I think that there has been a part of me over time that has struggled with delegation, struggled with giving someone else power. And I think, again, even just in the last couple of months, some of that, and I was already in the process of kind of owning that and really figuring out how to challenge that well before COVID. But I think that part of what happened as a result of COVID and some of the conversations that we're having in regards to racial inequality is I literally got to a space where I could not do it in a way that was functionally well for the business. And so relinquishing some of that power was about kind of understanding that I'm either going to do it all and run the risk of not doing it well, or I'm going to challenge some of the individuals who are invested in this organization to bring their levels of expertise and really move us forward in a way that we're going to be proud of and that we can all buy into. So I think it has really been a both and, where yes, historically there has been a struggle, but I've found such great value probably over the last 12 months and really figuring out, in part based off of the program, in part of where it's in my best interest to relinquish some of that control.
Okay, Moses, I had a note here, and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You said when we were talking about empathy that you feel the need to help your community, right? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you if you could say what you need help with to continue. You said you want to be intentional, right? We want to have accountability. What would you ask for help with to continue the fight?
Patience. I would ask for patience. Just because there aren't one solution for everything, and there are a lot of expectations at the same time. So I think that's the number one thing, and that's even for myself to get better at too. And I think that active patience is another thing that's important. Is that might not happen right now at this moment, but you're continually working on it at the same time. And so not just sitting on your hands, and just asking yourself to sit down or slow down, or another person to do the same. But that's where that accountability comes into play, where you're actively working at the same time as being patient. So that's what I would say.
So, hey, Moses, what I hear you saying is that while you ask for patience, we could all provide you and lots of other people with a little bit more grace.
Yeah, definitely.
Eric, did you have any thoughts on that?
I think one of the things that I would ask for is continued commitment. I think that one of the issues that I've seen over time is that in moments like this, whether we're talking COVID, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, is that in the height of emotion, we're very good about creating a unity of message that unfortunately wanes when the emotion wanes. And so I think that at a leadership level with people that I'm in connection and community with, that would be the challenge, that beyond next month beyond the verdict of the George Floyd case? What is the continued commitment that we are willing to make surrounding something like systemic racism or racial inequality? Because far too often, and me included, far too often, the conversation stops at the conversation, that we've had a unity of ideas of some level of understanding, but when it comes to the implementation, the action, the consistent calling to the carpet of things that we see tear away at the very fabric of unity, that continued commitment starts to wane when someone's not watching. And so that would be what I would challenge all of the communities that I'm connected to in any way to, is the continued commitment.
Yeah, I like that, Eric. That's very well said. I hear persistence when you say that. I hear constant, gentle pressure, which is like a management style that I've heard from other places before. Continued commitment. That's very well said.
And I appreciate that. I think, I know that that's one of the things that, as I have gone through this position here with Goldman Sachs and what we're doing at Columbus State as well, and in the program is, committing to making that change and to making more change and continuing that conversation. And I guess in the spirit of additional collective conversation, I do it up and see if others that have joined us on the call have questions that they would like to ask of Eric or Moses or anyone, or anything else you'd like to bring up from a dialogue perspective. So I'll pause for a minute. We will pause for a minute to see if anybody has any questions.
This is Sean Johnson. Eric, I'm because of your background in psychology, I'm kind of curious how you suggest we approach these courageous conversations. And I'll be very transparent. Talking about racial inequality, an African American and a Caucasian, how do you approach those conversations? Because George Floyd, that incident is really the tipping point for Caucasians. For African Americans, we've been experiencing this for a long, long time. So how do both African Americans and Caucasians approach, because you can't have any commitment without the conversation. So how do you approach those conversations outside of and I know we need to give grace and those sort of things, but how do those really get approached? Because, I'm thinking I've got a 5-year-old grandson that I've got to start talking to now about these things. And so how do I talk to him about the fact that LeBron James is told to shut up and dribble, but Drew Brees is celebrated for what he says?
So how much time do you have, Sean? No. I think it is such a complex question, and I'm going to kind of connect to two pieces of it. I think that one of the things that we have to do a better job of doing is creating an environment that can facilitate a conversation of this magnitude. I think all too often, and I'll speak for myself, as a Black man who is outraged by where we are nationally, I find myself getting involved in emotional conversations that I recognize almost from the beginning are not really conversations about impact and change. They're conversations about pointing out to someone else how ludicrous their conversation is at that moment, how ludicrous their point of view is. And so I think that we have to be really intentional and purposeful about where we're willing to put our energy in this conversation. And I think sometimes we feel like as long as we've spoken out that we've done our job, but in many cases we've spoken out in vain. We've exerted that energy when to some degree we know that conversation more than likely is not going to allow any level of action beyond the moment. And so I think that one of the things that I'm challenging people that I'm having these conversations with is to orchestrate conversations that you really believe have the ability to be more than momentary conversations, and really doing a better job of setting the stage of what the expectations of those conversations are. So for example, I go to a multicultural church, and so I don't want to hear presently another sermon or having another conversation about the injustice. We already have defined that. We have to have a much more purposeful conversation about what we as the church are going to do as a response to that. And so for me, what I'm doing is setting up a meaningful conversation with my pastor where we move beyond this and we're roping in other pastors who are leaders within the Columbus community and saying, beyond the emotion of this conversation, what are we doing? Challenging, one of the things my wife did over this past week is she wrote to her organization, we are a Fortune 100 company who has not made a statement about this injustice. What is our position? And those are conversations that create vulnerability, but at the end of the day, those are the conversations that move things forward. And so more than a response on a Facebook post, which I've been doing as well, please don't hear what I'm not saying. I think that we have to be positioning ourselves to make sure that the conversations are set up in a way where they have the potential. We can't control them, but they have the potential to have some level of sustaining power. And I just don't know that historically that we've done that well. And then to the latter part that you speak about where your grandson is concerned, it for me becomes one of the sorrowful woes of being a person of color in America. The reality is there is no gentle way, there is no politically correct way to talk about the fact that at 5, my son is 6, that we're already having to remove the innocence from them to talk about the impact of this society on their life. And yet, it's a conversation that we need to have. It's a conversation that we have to have. And I don't have an anecdote or even anything that would suggest how we do that better or more easily, because the reality is I just don't know that exists. Not if we want them to have a true understanding of the consequence of being Black in America today. And so that's one of those things I'm still working on it, brother. Still trying to figure out what and how we do that in a way that allows them to be 5 and 6, but still understand the gravity. And I haven't gotten there yet.
Hey, Sean, if you don't mind, Sean, I just wanted to know, what are some questions that your son asked you when you have that conversation with him? Is there any insights that you see that come from him naturally as you approach this conversation with him?
Well, it's not really about him having questions. I can't wait till he's got the questions. I've got to tell him now because, as Eric said, the impact is on his life now. He did ask his mother about why is everybody so sad. We have not let him see the video.
Yes.
So, he's trying to. He asked, "Why is Mimi yelling? What's he yelling about now?" So, those sort of things. So. And I can't because he likes to wear hoodies. And so just some of the actions and behaviors, you have to have that discussion. The same way my dad had a discussion with me, but it wasn't at 5 years old with all that happened. So, but he likes LeBron James. And he's seen that some of that commentary on the news about what Drew Brees has said, although he doesn't understand it, but he's aware because he's around when the conversation's happening that, LeBron was told to shut up and dribble. And Drew Brees was given his pass by the media. So he apologized, and I'm sure, and it was heartfelt. I think he was very heartfelt in his apology, but still the response is what it is. So, I am like Eric, still struggling and praying about what do I say to him, because I can't wait to talk to him. Unfortunately, his father's not in his life, so I can't wait to talk to him about the impact of being an African-American male because of this moment that's taken place. But and I'm assuming, Moses, you sound like you're younger.
Yes, I don't have any children.
Okay, what I'm curious about your take and how you see this. And what your message is to your constituents, the folks that you run with, because they're the ones really in the streets right now doing the peaceful protest. I am of the mind that most folks out there who really want to make an impact of change are peacefully protesting. So what's your message to your contemporaries?
Well, for me, yes, I don't have any children, and I've been listening to as many leaders in our community to see how they approach that conversation with their children and the people around them. But something in my own group of friends and just people, just being a young black man, is to look at this time and take it in and uh, use your voice to be of that peaceful protest. And even the ones that aren't, I understand why they're not. It's almost like there is no respect until things get expressed out and um, just coming from a place of just pain. And so that tells me this conversation is being had in the streets, from what I hear from some of my friends that are out there, and they look to their left and see a white person who's a peaceful protester, who's actually a brother or sister, who's doing the right thing and trying to use their privilege to combat the prejudice. And, we're awakening to a point where we're starting to see a lot of nuance and allowing united messages to strengthen us and push us forward. Because like Eric was saying, when the emotions die down, sometimes the commitment dies down. But as we are becoming more aware and more conscious, we're looking at it like, if we can utilize this strength that's to the left and to the right of me, then we can outsmart that, and still keep the focus where it needs to be at the same time. And when there are actionable items that can be done, whether it's voting or paying attention to who your district attorney is, or paying attention to who the police city chief of police is, you can be informed and you can do something about it. And all this is kind of energizing that at the same time, because now we do know who these people are, and now we do know what positions they hold and what power is being wielded, and how we can start to direct that to each other and say, these are the reasons why this is in place. Now here's what we need to do to dismantle it. Here's what we need to do to build something that we know we would want for our own children to grow up into. And so that's something going on in our.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess, and I apologize. My name is Dwayne. I was downtown. I worked for U.S. Bank. I was downtown, and I had a meeting. So I took the long way to come back, and I wanted to kind of see how the protest and all that stuff was going on right now. So this topic is really amazing to me, because one of the things that I saw firsthand was an African-American leaning against the building, pointing across the street to the protest, explaining everything to his young son, who was literally taken in by every word his dad was saying. So I was trying to get a picture of that at the stoplight, and it was virtually impossible. I mean, it was a peaceful protest. It was peaceful, but it was also discouraging to see downtown like it is. And it's not just downtown, it's all the way up High Street. It's selective in the places that were broken into, but to see that young man explaining what was going on to his kid, pointing across the street, it was encouraging, because now he's explaining not so much, hopefully, to take, but this is what they're doing and why they're doing it. So hopefully there are lessons in life that come out of this that are deeper and more meaningful, because as you mentioned, what's happened to Mr. Floyd is definitely tragic, but it's not the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, as Eric said earlier, I echo all those sentiments. I definitely think those are all something comes into play, but our leadership has even said here at the bank that we need to educate. We need to be more intentional. And I think that's how we move going forward. Education is definitely a key. And these incidents that happen now, yesterday, tomorrow, potentially, We just pray that, things don't escalate, that someone steps in to say, no, this can't happen.
And I know that we're close on time, but I just want to add this, because even in our conversation, I see how we gravitate, very rightfully so, to conversations that fathers and grandfathers are having with their sons. And I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I'm watching firsthand the emotional toll that this conversation has on someone who might not necessarily hear the narrative that as a young Black female, that she has to be fearful of her life being taken, but that she has to shoulder the fear of, could that happen to my father or my brother? And so watching her emotionally deal with that, and that not always be part of the national conversation. And I know this is the psychologist in me speaking, but I think it's another opportunity that we have in this conversation to make sure that we are not excluding the emotional impact of people who might not necessarily feel that they are going to be subjected to police brutality, but have to daily think about the impact that that has on the people that they love. And so, I mean, she's 13, so when we were seeing a lot of the uproar in 2016, she just was not at a space where I think she could get it or have access to it. But watching her emotional response to that has been gut-wrenching for me as a father, to not be able to rescue her from that reality. And so in all of the education and conversation that we're doing, having that piece also be part of it is something that we have to consider. So for what that's worth.
Well, as Eric said, I think we're winding close to our time here. But I'm going to point back to a couple major themes that we've talked about today. And that's been proactive communication and transparency, right? Doesn't matter if it's with our family, it doesn't matter if it's with our employees, doesn't matter if with our community, making sure that we're being proactively communicative and educating or expressing our thoughts and feelings to those around us. I would also say, when it comes back to intentionality and accountability, we've spent 60 minutes together on a Friday afternoon, and we're going to go our separate ways after a couple clicks. I would really encourage everyone on here, if there's something that you want, if there's something that you need from any other one of us, to please reach out and ask. Audra and myself work at Columbus State. You can find us there, John Krabill at Columbus State. So it's I am within shouting distance no matter where I am. And I think when we talk about holding ourselves and each other accountable, and just asking for help is not that big a deal anymore, and everybody needs it. So please do so. Please be proactive with that. And to Eric and to Moses, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. To Dwayne and Sean, thank you for asking questions and keeping that conversation moving. I've enjoyed myself, and it's given me a couple more things to think about and be intentional about. So thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Everybody have a good weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend.